On today's edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, the Detroit Pistons hire a new coach. JB Bickerstaff is the new head in Motown. Also, the Pistons signed Tobias Harris. What do we think about the deal? We talk about all of that and more on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano, and joining me this week is the full cast and crew, Aaron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia. Fellas, it's been a whirlwind couple of days, but how are you doing?
Lots been going on. NBA's in full swing, and the Pistons are making moves. Excited to be here with the boys to talk about it.
Did I missed the last two podcasts. Did anything happen while I was gone? I haven't really been paying attention. Did anything happen with the Pistons? The draft happened. I'm sure nothing else happened after that. So it's going to be a pretty light podcast, right? I haven't caught up at all. Nah, man, it's great to be back. Sorry to have missed probably the two most eventful podcasts of the year. It just is how the game goes sometimes, but I'm so happy to be back. And luckily, Detroit has provided, Trajan Langdon has provided some content for me to come back to. So I'm thrilled to be back, guys, and I can't wait to get into it. Let's do it.
We're happy to have you back. We're happy to have the full cast back, honestly. It seems like it's been a month. Yes, a lot has happened with the Pistons. We're going to get to all of it, or as much as we can. And maybe something breaking will happen while we're doing a pod. That's like always my dream, is that we get some earth-shattering thing in the middle of a pod. But before we get into all that and more, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this week's show, and that is BetOnline. And BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season, from baseball, golf, soccer, right up to all the top fights, UFC, MMA, and boxing, every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to the online casino, get on a game of blackjack or poker, or online with one of 150 slots games. Head on over to the website today, get in on the action, and use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for a 50% bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Again, that's BLEAV, for a 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet online, the game starts here. Aaron, where do you want to start? You can pick.
I'm good either way. Mike, let's open this up to Mike, because I think something that quickly flew under the radar for the Pistons, because so much has happened in such a short period of time, is the Pistons hired a head coach. And
they did.
What happens to know him pretty well? JB Bickerstaff, formerly of the Cleveland Cavaliers, is now the Detroit Pistons' new head coach. And I don't think we should start with anyone else but you, Mike, on this hire for the Pistons.
Yeah, I thought I escaped the whirlwind of JB Bickerstaff. It turns out he follows me, much like how KCP follows Gary Harris and gets him out of a job. JB Bickerstaff is following me as well. I said on the last pod that I don't think JB would be a bad hire, and I'll stand by that. I still don't think he's a bad hire. I think he's a good hire. I think he's a good guy who ran out of time with the Cavs. He had 5 years there. He took over for John Beilein. That's how long he's been there. John Beilein Sluggate was JB's welcome back into the head coaching sphere. And he took a team that was really bad, had a bunch of young guys who were just sort of mishmash all over the place, and figured out a way to bring them all the way up to getting into the second round of the playoffs. Getting into the playoffs, first off, for the first time without LeBron James, since Mark Price and Brad Daugherty were patrolling the court. So it goes without saying that he has been the ringleader for a lot of the Cavs' recent success. That being said, he did run out of time. Every team hits a plateau point where a coach can only take you so far, and the Cavs hit that this past offseason. He lost the locker room. When you add in a guy like Donovan Mitchell and you make a huge trade to get him, you're in win now mode. The expectations are raised, and while they did get past Orlando Magic in 7 tough games, they needed a new voice. That's not to say that JB was a failure. Like I said, he just ran out of time. But to bring him to Detroit is, to me, a smart move. He has experience coming into horrific situations, and John Beilein's departure was horrific. The Cavs were arguably the worst team in the East, and he navigated those waters. He navigated the Kevin Porter Jr. fiasco, where the Cavs traded him for the 59th overall pick, a protected 59th overall pick in the draft, which is basically nothing. Took that entire situation, flipped the Darius Garland situation. He was one of the worst players in the league, turned him into an all-star in 2 years. Is he the most inventive offensive mind? No, he's not. A lot of high pick and roll, a lot of basic stuff, a lot of, let's give Donovan Mitchell the ball and see what happens type of offense. But he's a good defensive coach. The Cavs have been a very good defensive team for several years now. They were a top 10 team in offense and defense last year. I think it's a good hire. I really do. Sean Sweeney, Mike Nori, Chris Quinn, we talked about these up and coming, assistants who have these grand plans to grow into the future Eric Spoelstras. But JB was a very good coach. It's just his exit was sort of marred by the Cavs sort of failing upwards to the second round of the playoffs, being very injured. And that's the lasting memory. But there were a lot of very positive memories before that of navigating young guys through really difficult situations and getting them to heights that they didn't think that they were going to get to, and that I didn't think the Cavs were going to get to.
The hiring was a divisive decision, it seemingly, in the Pistons community. With that being said, I think the pregame meal that the Pistons have on a game night is probably divisive to the Pistons community at this point, with how everyone reacts to anything that the Pistons do. But I really don't have a problem with the Bickerstaff hiring. I'll say that I defer a lot of my opinion on it to you and everything that you've said. I've heard some good, I've heard some bad on him, but a lot of the bad is kind of attached to everything that happened with Donovan Mitchell. And, I'm not going to go into a ton of details on that, but there were issues there. This is a new situation. This is a different situation. And in terms of looking at his on-court success, especially in the regular season, that is something the Pistons can aspire to. He has brought bad teams to good places. And I get it's not the flashy hire. I get it would have been, quote-unquote, sexier to go with Sean Sweeney or Mike Nori because we really haven't seen them as a head coach before, and it's something new. And there's just that idea of, like, you've got to get the young guy, you've got to get the new guy, whatever. But Bickerstaff has a track record. What I will give Pistons fans is that's how the Pistons have hired previously. The past 2 hires that they made have been head coaches that were just fired by their previous team. And I can get the reluctance there, especially after the Monty Williams situation. Dwayne Casey was different because he came to Detroit and they did make the playoffs with him. And then they ended up going into this rebuilding phase that Casey really was not equipped for. And the Pistons, were obviously tanking and whatnot during that. But Bickerstaff is a safe hiring. And Jasper, maybe this is where you come in here. What do we think of this notion that he's sort of this bridge the gap kind of coach? Hasn't had a ton of success in the playoffs, but can he build Detroit up and develop this group to the point where they get to that playoffs that first or second time, and then maybe the Pistons bring in a new coach? I mean, is that how this hiring should be viewed? What do you think of the Bickerstaff move?
That's exactly how I look at it. And everything I've seen so far from Trajan Langdon is pointing towards a very specific direction. And I understand that a lot of people don't like it. Like you said, the Pistons pregame meal is a matter of contention in the community right now. That's what 15 years of losing will do to a fan base. Straight up. That's just how it works at this point. And when I look at the JB deal, and not just that, but also all the moves that Trajan Langdon has made so far, it points to a guy who's absolutely not trying to swing for the fences. When I think of Troy Weaver, I think of a dude who got dealt a 2-7 and was like, no, I'm going to double down. I'm going to get the straight on the river. When I look at Trajan Langdon, I look at a guy who's playing the cards that he's dealt, and he's playing conservatively. But at the end of the day, playing poker, more times often than not, that's the guy who's going to win the game. And JB, to me, is exactly the type of coach that you want to bring in for this situation. No, he is not an offensive guru. No, he is not the type of guy that you bring in when you're making that title run. But guess what? That's not where the Pistons are at right now. Talk about, hey, JB has some, perhaps limited offensive ideals. Guess what? The Pistons right now are a very limited offensive team. Everything is going through Cade Cunningham next year. We'll see what happens with Jaden Ivey, whatever other moves come into play. But as of right now, you are running the Cade Cunningham offense. What you need to do is you need to bring this franchise back to a place of respectability. You need to bring this franchise back to a place where you're able to make improvements. And look, we can say that there's a ceiling with JB Bickerstaff, but the guy pulled off one of the greatest year-to-year increases in NBA history. The Cavaliers won 22 games his first full season as a head coach and won 44 the year after. That is not a coincidence. You don't just luck into that as a head coach. There's a reason that they've been a top 10 defensive team for the last 3 seasons. Yes, they have Jared Allen. They have Evan Mobley, of course. But the way that you get there and the way that you actually maintain a semblance of offensive ability when you have 2 guys in Evan Mobley and Jared Allen who are not perhaps the most versatile, who are still learning their game in Evan Mobley's respect. And you know what Jared Allen is offensively at this point. You're putting yourself into a position where you can just do the small things right? And that's what we've been begging for from this front office, from this coaching staff. You're not doing dumb stuff. JB Bickerstaff is not going to do dumb stuff. And I think that alone shows exactly where Trajan Langdon's trying to go. Is it going to be, hey, we're a title team in 3 years? No, probably not. But can you put yourself into a position to be in the playoffs in 2 years? Yes. I think that the moves he's made so far, and again, JB is just a part of that. I think we should probably get into, Tim Hardaway Jr. and Tobias Harris, but these moves all scream to me, no, we're not going for it all this year, which is what the Monty Williams hiring was. It was let's go for broke. No, we're not trying to go out there and sign the sexiest young free agents. We're not swinging for the fences. We're going to do this rebuild the right way, the way that Troy Weaver didn't do it. And I think that that's very telling. And I think the JB Bickerstaff hiring shows exactly what direction this front office wants to go in. There is an expectation here that you are going to improve. And what the ceiling is, we don't know at this point. But you can't even see the ceiling if you can't get out of the basement. And that's where the Pistons are right now. JB Bickerstaff is the guy that builds the staircase so you can at least get to the ground floor. And after that, let's see what happens. I think the hiring and the length of years attached to it, same with the Tobias Harris signing, all show we are going to stay the course for X amount of years, but we're also going to put ourselves into a position where if things aren't working out and the way that we want them to, if we think that a change needs to be made, you have the ability to do that. You have the flexibility to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good hiring, honestly. And I'm sure people disagree. but I think it's
do.
kind of a no-brainer based
No,
on what you're trying to do with this front office. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and it's look, people are gonna disagree. There's gonna be people that disagree with every move that this team makes, and I am not afraid to tell you when I disagree with something that the Pistons do. I mean, did it for years under the Troy Weaver regime. I don't really have any complaints right now under the first moves of Trajan Langdon, outside of maybe the Ron Holland decision. But I'm leaving that one up to him. I'm giving him his fair chance, as I talked about on the solo podcast that I did on Saturday. Mike, I did want to bring this back to you here because you watched a lot more Cleveland Cavaliers than we did, but I did watch some Cleveland games last year. And one thing that I noticed was that JB Bickerstaff did a lot of staggering, specifically with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, and then Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. That was not something that the Pistons did under Monty Williams. I'm very curious, what do you think? Because there was still a lot of talk in Cleveland and around the league that Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell can't, and won't be able to work together. What do you think he's going to be able to do with the current backcourt pairing of Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, assuming that both of them are still on the roster come October?
So when the Cavs started to get, because just to back up a little bit, this isn't just a Mitchell and Garland thing. Before Garland was Colin Sexton. Before Mitchell was Colin Sexton and Darius Garland. They'll never fit. They won't fit. So he's been through the ringer on guards that don't fit now twice. What worked the year that the Cavs went from 22 wins to 44 wins, they made that jump. They made the play-in. They lost to Atlanta. Was they had a veteran, and the best plus minus that year, I think it was 21-22, the best plus minus for the backcourt was Darius Garland and Ricky Rubio. He had a veteran as sort of the point that was able to work with both of the young guards and sort of stabilize things. So the Pistons haven't gone out and went after a veteran point guard. This is really like Corey Joseph territory, maybe. But I think having a veteran point guard to be the stabilizer would be helpful. The Cavs also had Kevin Love, who was sort of the voice of reason on the floor at all times, being a veteran, a playoff and battle-tested guy. He was relied upon quite heavily. So I think JB is going to rely on his vets. He's done that a lot. He's going to rely on Tobias Harris now, which we'll get to later. He's going to rely on any other vets that come through. It's sort of his fatal flaw too, is like even last year, he relied on Tristan Thompson a lot to sort of stabilize the front court when things got tough, when Evan Mobley was getting punched around, when Jared Allen was getting punched around, he went to Tristan Thompson. But I think what he's going to do is rely on the vets here. Not so much so where Monty's throwing out full bench lineups for no reason at all, despite having the worst bench unit in the league. But I think when the going gets tough, he's going to pull out one of the young guys and put in a vet, or he's going to put the vet out there with the young guys and see what happens to try and stabilize things. He's going to do a lot of testing, a lot of tinkering. There was a lot of Colin Sexton and Darius Garland two-man game with Kevin Love in a pick and pop big type of situation. You might be able to do that with Simone Fontecchio. So he's going to rely on the vets, I think, is the overarching thing here. He's going to rely on the Tobias Harrises of the world. If they bring in a veteran center like a Taj Gibson, maybe not a Taj Gibson, he's a little bit old, but a battle-tested vet to sort of be the voice of reason on the court and not let the guys flounder out there. If Darius Garland wasn't playing well, Darius Garland was off the floor. And then when there were times where you wanted him to, struggle through and try to wiggle his way out of the situation, he left him out there with a vet so that they could do it together. So I think that's what you're going to be looking at with JB Bickerstaff, is he's going to rely on his vets. But the players in Cleveland loved him. They really did. They just, like I said, they ran out of time. They didn't have a whole lot of ill will towards him, especially in those early years. They really respected him. Kevin Love was a huge fan of him. So it's a testament to, I think, being with the team for 5 years.
How tied is Isaac Okoro and JB Bickerstaff? Because I know we've kind of heard the rumblings that the Pistons are a threat to offer Okoro a deal. He's a restricted free agent right now. I mean, do you think that that's tied together? I can't imagine the Pistons are making that sort of hiring decision with Bickerstaff simply because they're intrigued with Okoro. But Okoro did greatly improve, specifically as a shooter under Bickerstaff. I mean, do you think the fit makes sense there?
Aaron, this is like the Uno reverse card here.
I know, but this is like your time to shine because you've got all the answers. Like you've got all the knowledge, you've got all the experience with this. This is a great little niche thing that we have here at Palace of Pistons. Like having a Cavs guy on the show, we have some real inside knowledge on this hiring and any of the players from Cleveland. Like this is your time to shine, Mike.
Well, so Isaac Okoro is a lot like JB Bickerstaff. I think there's a lot of similarities there because they both had very slow growth, and they just kind of ran out of time with both of them. You know, they had to move on from JB. I wouldn't be surprised if they moved on from Okoro based on what Patrick Williams just got, 5 for 90. He's going to get somewhere in that area as a very good defensive wing who has gotten better at shooting. I wouldn't necessarily think that getting JB certainly means that the Pistons are going to go after Isaac Okoro. I think they do have a glut of guys that kind of have shaky shooting already with Ron Holland and Asar Thompson and Jaden Ivey. And really, you know, Cade isn't like a knockdown shooter, but he has gotten better. But from a defensive standpoint, from an energy standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to go after somebody like Isaac Okoro. But I would want to see a wing moved first, and you know maybe it's Jaden Ivey. So I wouldn't use ink to say that Isaac Okoro is going to go to the Pistons, but it would not surprise me. Cleveland.com reported this morning that the Pistons are one of the teams that the Cavs are concerned about throwing a huge offer sheet at Okoro and forcing the Cavs' hand to, you know, pay up. I think he'd be a good fit on the Pistons, assuming that one of those other guards or wings is no longer there. And he has gotten better. He's 23. He's only like 3 months older than Dalton Connect. So he is very young with room to improve. Certainly as a shooter, he shot 40% from the corner for corner threes, that is. So it's possible. I wouldn't say that that's a for sure thing based on some of the other players on their roster already, though.
Yeah, I just think that that's one of those things. Like, there's bigger needs for this squad right now. I still think backup center. Although we will see, perhaps with the Tobias Harris signing, this is where we finally get back to Isaiah Stewart at the backup 5 minutes. I just think there's bigger needs. Like when you have Harris, when you have Hardaway, when you have Holland, when you have Thompson, when you have Fontecchio, because you have to assume that he is coming back. Like I just don't see any way he isn't for this team. Like he was just too good last year. And he fits just too damn well with his roster. I just don't think like Okoro is necessarily a need, and I have a hard time seeing how that like 2 to 4 rotation kind of works out with him there. I just think you need a backup point guard more at this point. And that's whether or not you hold on to Jaden Ivey or you trade him. I still think backup point guard is a need. And like you said, Mike, like he likes to rely on his veterans to stabilize whatever's going on. Pistons don't really have a guy like that. Like obviously Cade is very mature as a point guard for his age, but like you can't always rely on Cade. You can't put all your eggs in that basket at all times, especially since like, and I think we're kind of the belief that it's not necessarily the biggest thing, but like there are injury risks there still. There is the question of whether he can stay healthy. I think it hasn't quite been answered yet. So for me, I just think like backup point guard's got to be where you're going to throw some money at someone. But the Pistons still have a lot of cap space left. They have $24 million plus an $8 million trade exemption. Like they're still in position where they could foreseeably make a couple signings. I just think it'd be hard with Okoro. Like, do you think he's getting less than Pat Williams? I think he's getting more. Like, even if he's getting right around that range, like if he's getting 17, 18 million a year, that's a big chunk gone. And I don't know if you can afford then to take on like a even like a Tyus Jones. Like I know Tyus Jones is a guy that's been linked to the Pistons. It's a guy I'd be very happy to get. So yeah, I just don't know if Okoro is necessarily a need at this point, or if it necessarily like fits in with what the Pistons are trying to do moving forward. And even if it's like something that JB would look at his roster and say, this is what I need right now. Like, I think he's probably looking at it and saying, hey, I need a Ricky Rubio more than I need anything else. So, do you guys think it's time to get into the big money deals? Like, is it time? Do we have to talk about the return of the man, the myth, the playoff choker himself, Tobias Harris? Uh, I don't know, man. I mean, this is one thing that we've been talking about. It feels like for half a year at this point is Tobias Harris coming back to Detroit. And guess what? It happened. And it happened for $52 million in 2 years. I will just start off by saying, like, I think this was a really good deal. I think this was pretty much like the perfect way to bring Tobias Harris onto your team. You did it for under $30 million. You did it for what he's worth, I think, which is like $26 million a year. And you did it for 2 years. And Aaron, I know you were a little hesitant about the Ron Holland pick, but with Tobias Harris, Simone Fontecchio in the fold, this seems like the perfect way to develop both Asar Thompson and Ron Holland for the future, and give them some minutes, but also, like you said, Mike, with JB Bickerstaff loving his veterans, giving that solid presence both in the locker room and on the court, somebody who wants to be in Detroit and somebody who has produced for Detroit and other teams. I know Philly fans are going to say we're idiots, but no, Tobias Harris is pretty freaking useful in the regular season, which is the only season the Pistons are going to be a part of this year. So yeah, Aaron, I'd like to start off with you. Like, how do you feel about this Tobias Harris signing? And I think we should also probably mention like Tim Hardaway Jr. now being on the team as well. Like, that's another 3-point shooting veteran who wants to be in Detroit. Michigan ties, went to U of M, guy who has been in winning situations before, just went to the finals, has a playoff choker reputation as well. So, Aaron, how are you feeling about this? Like, I personally think this is a really good signing. Do you feel a little differently? Are you on the same page as me?
Yeah, we talked a lot about the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade on Friday when I did the show with Tim, and then kind of circled back on it even a little bit on the solo pod because so many people were up in arms over losing Quentin Grimes, which, again, everything the Pistons do is so divisive, I guess. And there are people that hate this deal for Tobias Harris as well, don't get me wrong. I think this is kind of exactly what the Pistons needed. They get a guy that, for as bad as he was, I guess, in Philly last year for Sixers fans, he was over 17 points a game, just under 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 36% from the 3-point line, which was even in a way somewhat of a down year for him in that regard. And he was still that good in a city that he just kind of ran his course in, almost kind of like JB Bickerstaff did in Cleveland. I think this is exactly the type of guy the Pistons needed. They desperately needed shooting. They desperately needed forward depth. They desperately needed experience there. And Tobias Harris gives them that, and they did so on a good deal. It's a short-term deal, 2 years. Yeah, do they pay the Detroit tax a little bit, giving them $52 million? I guess. But what else are they spending that cap space on? They've got $25 million still to work with. They've got a mid-level exception still to work with. Like, yes, they still need to re-sign or extend Simone Fontecchio. Yes, I'd like them to get a veteran backup point guard, as we discussed. I think they could be working on a center option as well. We know they're going to continue to look in the trade market to take on contracts attached with assets there. But to go out and get a starting level forward that gives you the production that Tobias Harris does, it was a big win for the Pistons. And it's not going to win them playoff games, but this team was so far away from that, is so far away from that. It's going to take a lot to get into that conversation of ever being a playoff team. But this is a step in the right direction. You're getting a guy that gives you proven production. And I just don't understand the disdain for this signing. Like, there's no, who else are the Pistons getting with that money is what I'm asking. Who else were they signing? What are they trading for that Tobias Harris is worse than? I really don't know. And so I think this was an absolutely great move by them, all things considered.
Mike, I want to let you talk about this. I want to just kind of build upon what Aaron said here. For last season, when the Pistons went out and their big move was trading for Joe Harris's corpse, maggots and all, it was funny because Troy Weaver was talking about how this was them trying to evaluate their young guys. And the Tobias Harris signing, the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade, this is how you actually evaluate your young players. You surround them with NBA talent. You put them into a position where they have guys who they can both play off of, who complement their games, and also can bring them along as NBA players who are able to not be coaches, but to lead them on the court and lead them off of the court. When I look at the Tobias Harris signing, when I look at the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade, this to me, it's like, oh yeah, this is how you rebuild a team. You bring in guys that are not going to be there for the end product, but are going to help you get there. We've talked about, what do you do with Jaden Ivey? What do you do with Jalen Duren? What is Cade Cunningham's ceiling? This is how you find out. You bring in players who are not going to eat in to what those guys do, but are going to complement them and give them an actual NBA roster to see exactly what they're capable of. Like, how many times did we see last year Cade Cunningham drive into the lane with two guys on him, kick it out for a wide open shot, and dribbles, pass up the open jumper? That's not going to happen this year, period. It's not going to happen. And we talk about, Jaden Ivey not having space to maneuver, not really knowing what he's doing out there, not having the focus. That's not going to happen when you have players next to you who are at your skill level, above it, who have won, who have contributed and are still contributing to NBA teams. That doesn't happen. So I think for me, it's like, not only are these guys going to come in and contribute, they're going to give you an actual opportunity to see what your young players can do next to actual NBA players, which frankly did not happen last year. Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., are they going to win you playoff games? Probably not. But are they ever going to let you lose 28 games in a row? Hell no. Never going to happen. Never going to happen. And so I think for me, on that level alone, it's a win. Mike, I'm very interested to see what you have to say about this Tobias Harris deal, because I know we've all kind of been back and forth on it. Like, is it good? What's the price tag? How many years? Aaron and I seem to be pretty much in sync here. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think for the same reasons that for the same reasons that Aaron had, which is, what else are you going to spend your cap space on? The center market dried up very fast. You had to pivot. Tobias Harris has been linked to Detroit for months. As soon as the Sixers fans got sick of him, they were like, let's send him to Detroit. He's a vet in the locker room of a team that desperately needs some guidance and vision of where to go from a 14-win season. And Tobias Harris can take shots. He can eat up minutes. There will be a couple of random nights where he doesn't miss, and you're like, oh my gosh, where's this been? This is a Malachi Flynn-esque experience of where you can't miss a shot. Oh no, wait, no, this is actual basketball by NBA players. It's a good signing. The dollar amount is the dollar amount. Look around the league at some of the other contracts being thrown out there. This is not a deal in which the Pistons are now handicapped for the next 4 or 5 years. Had this been a 4 or 5 year contract or something much longer and more lucrative, then I think we're talking about, okay, maybe the team is a little more hamstrung when Cade is, going to have his extension kick in, or Jay Knight's extension kicks in, or start time, et cetera, on and on. You don't have that. You have flexibility in a couple of years. And in those couple of years, you're going to hope that guys like Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr. are able to not only eat some shots and take up some playing time and make the Pistons look a lot better. They are both floor raisers for sure. Your ceiling, is not super high as a result of their signing, but your floor is greatly raised, which is what we're looking for. Look, if the Pistons double their win total to 29 wins, you think, oh, wow, it's a 29-win team. They doubled their win total in 1 year. I mean, come on. And guys like Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr. can help do that very quickly. Are they world beaters? No. There's a reason that Tim Hardaway was dumped for a guy who hated being in Detroit and some draft picks. So I'm fine with the Tobias Harris signing. It makes a lot of sense. You needed a shooter desperately. You needed a wing in the room desperately. You didn't break the bank, and you maintained your flexibility going into the years where hopefully the Pistons are trying to put together a team that is playoff bound or more, and you want to have that cap flexibility going into those years.
And maybe the biggest impact of the Tobias Harris deal means no one's going to be subjugated to seeing Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart starting in the front court together again. Like, this move makes so much sense for them, and it eliminates a major pain point from last year, a major point of contention in the Pistons, specifically under Troy Weaver's guidance, trying to pigeonhole these young players that he put together into a roster that didn't fit. And so Harris just makes everything make a lot more sense while bringing that experience, that production to the table. Look, I don't know how much else we want to really talk about today. I feel like by the time we're done recording, the Pistons are going to have made another move. That's just how these things go. Again, they still have $25 million left in cap space. They have the mid-level exception, which is, I believe, around $8 million. And they still have some things that they need to do to the roster. Let's be very clear here. This isn't a complete roster. This isn't a roster that they can bring out next year and expect to win, more than 25 games with. The action items. Simone Fontecchio, what's the deal with him? I know they don't have to sign him and would wait to sign him until, last in the order of operations, but I think you'd still like to hear that they've, agreed to terms and are, going to sign it eventually. You'd just like to know that he's going to be back, because he was a really good piece for Detroit last year when he arrived, and him and Cade Cunningham had really good synergy, and they really liked playing with one another. So you'd like to know that he's coming back. The backup point guard spot, I think that's a big thing for Detroit. Yes, they have Marcus Sasser, but Jasper, you mentioned it, Cade Cunningham does miss some games. And you'd like to have a veteran on the roster that can give you minutes, even if he's a guy that can play the one or the two. There was a report that came out that if the Lakers are going to land DeMar DeRozan, they're going to have to move off some salary, and D'Angelo Russell could be an option. Like, that's a guy that the Pistons could go after. That could make sense for them to work in the trade market. Can they get anything attached to D'Angelo Russell to take on his contract, and also bring in a guy that could, in theory, really help this team? I think his experience, his shooting, like, that's a guy that can play in the second unit and could play alongside Cade Cunningham. Like, that would make a ton of sense for Detroit. Could they work a deal with Washington for Tyus Jones? I mean, there are things that need to be done for Detroit. What are they going to do at the center spot? Are they going to bring in a stretch five? Jalen Smith got signed earlier. I thought he would have been a really good option for Detroit in that regard. I'm not sure if all of the core guys from Troy Weaver's drafts are going to stay, and two of those guys that could be on the move are Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren. Like, how does that impact what Trajan Langdon wants to do at the center spot? A lot of the top free agent centers are off the board, making it look like Detroit's going to have to work the trade market in that area. But still some action items for Detroit to do, and free agency's been live for just over a day now, so plenty of time to do it. But there's more work to be done there.
I think, look, the thing with Stewart, I have issues with it. I mean, we have talked more than enough about Isaiah Stewart as a stretch four on this podcast for multiple lifetimes. But if Isaiah Stewart's a backup stretch five, I'm cool with that, man. I'm super okay with that. I still think you need to bring in another body, but like I'm happy to see what happens there. If you can, play him in small ball lineups, if you bring him in for those more physical matchups, it's not like the guy plays Giannis Antetokounmpo really well. Like he has certain matchups that he's really useful in. It just is what it is. I think that's definitely good. There's got to be some movement. I think we're all in agreement. There's got to be another veteran guard brought in. I'd love to have D'Angelo Russell. Last word for me on the acquisition so far is I think it's really important to note Tim Hardaway Jr.'s contract expires after this year. Cade Cunningham's contract extension kicks in next year. Tobias Harris, his contract is overlaps with Cade's extension for 1 season. After that, you have both Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey extension eligible. So I think what this does here, there's also a financial aspect of it that I don't think we necessarily touched on. The finances of these deals so far are really smart. They've given you a real NBA roster, then they've also kept you in a position to where if you need to extend your guys to big contracts, great. If you need to let them go, also great. You still have a bunch of free cap space left after these next 2 seasons. So I just am really a big fan, honestly, of what's happened so far. I get what you're saying about Fontecchio. I will just say this, because he's a restricted free agent, in my opinion, the second he signs with Detroit, that's when it's over. That's when free agency is over for the Pistons, because he's the guy that they can sign to go over the cap. It's not an issue there. I just think that's the only reason why we haven't heard anything about it, is because they don't need to do anything. He's a restricted free agent. Another team wants to sign him to an offer sheet. Fine, the Pistons can match it. I think the fact that another team has not signed him to an offer sheet should tell you a little something about probably he's not on the move. Like, if I could, massage your fears for a moment there, Eric.
Please do, because if the Italian stallion Simone Fontecchio isn't back in Detroit, like,
look,
losing all the worry over Trajan Langdon is real, and
losing Gigi
tables turn.
Losing Gigi to Tome was hard enough as is. I can't do it again, man. I can't do it again.
Plus, Troy before he left had to give us one more dagger in the heart and trade off Gabriele Procida as well. So, there's only one guy left for the Italian brigade, and the Pistons have to do whatever it takes to keep him.
I think we're all in agreement there. No price is too high.
One thing we somehow haven't talked about, and I don't get how, but it's because there's been so much going on. Kind of some interesting wording last night. Initially reported that Cade was planning on signing an extension with the Pistons. Then Bobby Marks of ESPN came out and said talks are ongoing. No deal is done or imminent. Sounds like the Pistons are going to end up agreeing to a full max extension with Cade Cunningham, $226 million extension. Plus, I think that will go up if there are specific incentives included in the deal, such as like making the All-NBA team. But how are we concerned about that? Because it was essentially like reported and then kind of backed off. What are we thinking there? I mean, I'm under the impression this is happening. Maybe there's just some final details, I guess, that have to be ironed out.
I think it was interesting who reported what. Shams reported they agreed to it. Bobby Marks said they didn't. I just would draw my own conclusions based on who those guys' sources are most of the time. I mean, let's just leave it at this. What has Woj been signing all his tweets with? It's from the agents. So I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm not saying that Bobby Marks is talking to GMs and Shams is talking to agents, but if that is the case, I also think that's kind of interesting that the agents would say it happened and the GMs might not.
He also can't sign until Saturday. So, Evan Mobley is still due an extension as well, and the expectation is he's going to sign. And that's a player from the same draft class. So I think it's more we're letting other things take shape first before. It doesn't matter because Cade can't sign it anyway. It's been reported for several months that maybe weeks at this point, that the Pistons were going to offer the max to Cade, And it seemed like the expectation was that he was going to sign it. So I'm not concerned. The wording was very interesting. Similarly today with Klay Thompson going to Dallas, immediately as Woj tweeted it, you had Chris Haynes coming out saying no deal is imminent. The Warriors are haggling. So it's just that weird time of the year where news breaking and what order makes a lot of a difference to agents and how it's worded. And there's a lot of pandering happening behind the scenes. So I wouldn't be too worked up about it if I were a Pistons fan concerned about Cade. I think he's going to be signing the max, and it'll be formally announced Saturday with the rest of the draft class signings.
Well, I don't know the wording on the CBA tampering stuff. It could have something to do with that. I think we're all in agreement, though. Like, Cade's going to get offered the max and he's going to sign it, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I just thought I wanted to bring it up because I thought how all of that kind of got reported and aggregated last night was interesting. I think we should end with maybe the biggest free agency news, though. Buddy Boeheim has a new home. Jasper's boy, Buddy Boeheim, to the Oklahoma City Thunder. The dream lives on, and there's rumors swirling that Jasper's headed to a Thunder podcast and he's leaving Palace of Pistons.
Yeah, I'm going to I'm out of here, guys. Buddy, I got it. I'm like the Brian Windhorst of the Pistons. Buddy Boeheim is my personal LeBron. I just go wherever he goes. No, Trajan, I almost lost faith in you, but now that I see the signings you've made, I understand there wasn't the space for Buddy to take over the offense. Obviously, he's going to Oklahoma City, to lead that squad to glory. He wanted to. It was a parting gift. He said, "Look, Buddy, we're not making the playoffs this year. You deserve to go to a title contender," and he made it happen. And it's just nice to see the Thunder finally get that missing piece to push him over the top, baby. It is what it is. And I don't know if anyone in that front office is associated with Syracuse anyway. So finally, beating the Nepo hire the charges. What a mitzvah. What a mitzvah.
There we go. That's good. What about Mo Wagner? Speaking of Nepo, let's just bring in another Michigan player as a center. He's the best center left on the market, supposedly.
Yes.
Goga's gone. Goga's off the market. So
Goga's gone.
I was interested in Goga or Mo from Orlando. So I think either would be good ads for Detroit. I think they need to add some depth there, even if they did, keep Duran and plan to use Stewart as a 5. Like in some matchups, I think it makes sense to have another center and then one that can space the floor. I'd like Wagner a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is if you bring in Mo Wagner, I think that means you can't bring Killian Hayes back. You know what I mean? They've got too much history there.
Oh no! Well, we do need a veteran point guard. So.
Oh yeah. What veteran? What do you mean, like World War I veteran? Like a guy missing a leg?
Yeah.
Because
I'm bringing Steve Blake.
I think I'd bring in a World War I veteran over Killian Hayes at this point. All right.
France would also agree. The French national team would also rather have a World War I vet than Killian Hayes.
Yeah, I can't believe he was even on the short list, to be honest with you. Yeah, I mean, shoot, what's Mikhail Petrus up to these days? Like, my God, yeah, I had to pull that one. I had to pull that one out of the bag. Yeah, no, we're talking about Killian Hayes and Mo Wagner, guys. I think that means it's probably time to wrap up. Yeah,
I believe that's the end. Killian Hayes is going to be the new Mitch McGary for this show, where as soon as we hit Mitch McGary, we have to start to wrap up the podcast.
How dare you? How dare you put them in the same? Killian Hayes could never blow Dro like Mitch McGary. Did I ever say on the pod the one time I was in Ann Arbor and I was picking up some plants from a botanist. And I was at English Gardens doing a little shopping, and I walk into the house, and Mitch McGary is sitting on the couch, just smoking. Allegedly, just planting seed after seed after seed. He was gardening away. I still had faith, though. I still thought I was going to make it in the league. This should tell you exactly why I'm not in an NBA front office. So,
where has that story been for the last, I don't know, Aaron? I made a Mitch McGary joke like 4 years ago.
Yeah, we've been running with the Mitch McGary stuff since 2016, 2017. I mean, it's an old one, but look, I think I'm pulling the executive order here. I'm going to go right into the plugs because I don't know, this could get way off the tracks if we keep going here. So, look, as we wrap, got to give a huge shout out to all the listeners, all of the followers, all of the subscribers. The support was absolutely incredible throughout the draft. The podcast, like you guys coming out in droves to support and talk and engage, that's all incredible, and we really appreciate it. I know we have a ton of new subscribers specifically on YouTube, so welcome to the channel. We hope you enjoy the podcast. A core tenet of what we do, though, is we want to hear from you guys. Like, we want to know what you think about the signings, the hirings, the trades. Tell us what you think in the comments. We got a lot of people that do, and a lot of people that usually disagree with us that tell us, and like, that's good too. We want to know what you guys think. So continue to support us. I'll give another shout out to palaceofpistons.com. It's our free newsletter that you can sign up for. It takes 30 seconds to do. You get emails directly to your inbox when we publish something, when we publish the podcast, when Mike puts out his weekly column, his weekly news recap, the weekly drive. All of that stuff goes directly to you for free. So please go to palaceofpistons.com. Subscribe, sign up, subscribe to wherever you're watching the show from or listening to the show from. Leave us a like, leave us a comment, leave us a review. Let us know what you're thinking. And we really do appreciate the support as we continue to build and expand and do great things here. So thank you to everyone.
Aaron, that's a good wrap. Thank you for getting us back on track from Mitch McGary gardening stories. Jasper, you have any final words before we head back to cover free agency?
It's just great to be back. I'm happy we have news about the Pistons that is, at least so far, it seems positive.
Good.
And it's nice to see things heading in a direction that I think we're all in line with so far. So great to be back, guys. Let's do it again next week.
Yes, and we are going to do it again next week, and we hope that you'll be joining us as well. For my co-hosts, Jasper Apollonia and Aaron Johnson, I'm Mike Anguilano. Thank you for joining us on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network and brought to you by Bet Online. We will see you all next time.